Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Selling. Sean Rhodes here, the Chief Sales Sergeant of Bulletproof Selling and author of the book Bulletproof Selling, a guide for systemizing sales on the battlefield of business. Now, here for just about 100 episodes, we have been promoting the fact that sales is not a area where you can rely on hope. What that means is that hope is not a part of your sales strategy. It shouldn't be. And so we are here every single week, sometimes multiple times a week, helping you remove hope from how it is that you sell. No matter what industry you're in, no matter how small or large the size of your team is, we are here at Bulletproof Selling to make sure that you are a fanatic like we are about making your mission the mission of your prospects, and to do that, not hoping that you figure out how to serve them. So we've been able to bring on best-selling authors, Hall of Fame speakers, people that have been leading multinational sales teams in the course of their careers, and folks that are out there in the field on the front lines selling and managing salespeople themselves. And out of every single one of our episodes with our guest, we build a sales system that you can use no matter the size of your team or the size of your goals. So in the world that we live in today, technology is front and center in the world of our prospects, and it should be in our world as well. I mean, since episode 1, we have been promoting the value of using something like a CRM. There's 1,000 of them out there, so as long as you're leveraging one of them, you've got my support. But that prevents us from having to pick up the phone or dial out or even receive emails or phone calls, hoping that we remember best practices, what to say, what to do, how to respond, how to make sure that we're providing value to our prospects. And so when I run across people that are expert at leveraging the height of technology as it is today, you think like artificial intelligence, think these state-of-the-art platforms that allow us to remove a lot of the legwork that salespeople have had to do the last couple of years so that you can be more present with your prospects, help them fulfill their missions, and make them more effective on the battlefield of business that they operate on. When I run across those types of people, I have to have them on. So I want to welcome, without further ado, to the show, someone who's going to teach us about leveraging those types of platforms as part of our sales process, Mr. Collin Mitchell. Collin, welcome to Bulletproof Selling.
Hey, thanks so much for having me on. Really excited to dig into this, and actually, what a great thing that you've put together for people here with the book and the show. So I'm honored to be a part of it.
Well, it's all from giving back to the folks that trained me, kept me alive on the battlefield, Collin. So, it's just one of the smaller things that I can do to repay them, because, of course, we all have to do something after the military. Sales is a great thing to do. And so if I can help salespeople, civilian or military, do better at what they do, hey, I'm fulfilling my mission. So talk to us about your mission, though. Folks get to hear from me every week. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about how you ended up as the leading cutting edge of what people are doing with technology and sales. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, I mean, AI is a hot topic for a lot of people right now, for a lot of sales orgs. And so I actually was an entrepreneur for over 10 years and had a few small exits myself. And then I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I was doing some work with Humantic AI, and then decided to go full time with them as their head of sales in January, just mainly because really wanted to be a part of something bigger than anything that I'd ever built before on my own. And just was really passionate about their mission to humanize the internet, and to help sales teams be more authentic in the way that they sell by leveraging the personality insights that Humantic provides through AI.
And so I'm already getting spammy messages, Collin, from folks wanting to help me leverage things like Chat GPT to almost be less human in how I sell and how I reach out to prospects. So when you mention humanize the internet with AI, please educate me, because obviously the way that people are doing this in a bad way is front and center. So how are you doing it the opposite way? How are you taking artificial intelligence and using it to help salespeople be more human in how they sell?
Yeah, I mean, with all good things, right? There's people that are gonna not use it properly. I mean, perfect example is even social media, right? The social, platform like LinkedIn exists to build business relationships, right? And many people abuse that in many ways, right? And so that's kind of an example, right? So with all things, there's a good and a bad side to it, of course. There's people that are going to use AI to just do more volume and spam more people, and try to look for that silver bullet to get the results that they're looking for. Where, we actually take a different approach where we're providing insights for sellers in order to sell to their buyers the way their buyers want to buy and be more
Mhm.
authentic in their sales process. Seller, I think whether people agree or disagree with, what we're talking about today, I think something we all can agree on is we all have personality types. Everybody has a personality type. Some are compatible, some are not. And even if you're on the fence a little bit about that, you can kind of think about a time where, if you're a seller, I'm assuming most people are sellers here that are listening, or even founders that sell, maybe entrepreneurs. In many regards, we're all selling, but that's a whole nother topic, right? There's probably a time where you can think about where there's a prospect that you were dealing with and things were just easy, just felt easy,
Mhm.
or you can even relate this to dating, right? Maybe you're dating and there's some people where it's like, oh, it's just too much work. Where, maybe your significant other is like, it just didn't feel like as much work, right? So if you think about it in a prospect, there's probably a time where you feel like it was just easy. And then there's probably times where you just feel like it wasn't easy. And a lot of that has to do with conflicting personalities, right? And so what we do is we give sellers the ability to know the personality of these people before they ever meet them. And
Mm.
this is not a new way of selling. Maybe some people here listening to the show might be familiar with disc selling. Um, Disc selling, great way to sell. It's how to communicate and understand what people value, and how to customize how you sell based on that human that you're selling to. Well, disc selling is great, but there hasn't been technology available to really do it well. You're largely dependent on reading people's body language, picking up on certain cues and words that they say, and really understanding human psychology rather well in order to effectively follow sort of a disc selling type of process through your entire sales funnel. And then throw the virtual way of selling into the mix where people are meeting in person far less than they used to. That creates
Mhm.
an extra layer of challenges. So we give these sales teams the ability to understand their prospects' personality before they ever meet them so that they can personalize how they show up all the way from prospecting to negotiating and closing.
So this sounds like then a way to discover a lot of things that our prospects are concerned about, because obviously personality type's going to be different. I'm just thinking of like two incredibly separate industries. If I'm selling to executives in human resources, or I'm selling to executives at a construction company, their needs, their wants, their concerns going to be a lot different between the two. Which means if I show up with a templated message that I think is going to apply to both of them, I'm at the best extending my sales cycle. At worst, I'm going to shut this sale down long before it can ever get started. So, where do you see salespeople relying on hope in how they're reaching out to folks, Collin, with the needs that they think these people have? Where are
Mhm.
salespeople hoping that that templated message is going to land the same across everybody? Because, hey, we're selling the same thing. So, why isn't everybody ready to buy the same way? I'm curious where you see hope play into that.
Yeah. So hope is a dangerous thing to rely on, right? Hope is good in many ways, but to rely on that in your sales process, not so good.
Mm.
And I love that really cover this quite a bit here on bulletproof selling. But I think that a lot of people are hoping in their top of funnel activities, in their prospecting, that these generic ways of reaching out are going to work, right? They're kind of relying on, hey, sales is a numbers game. If I send enough messages, if I connect with enough people on LinkedIn, if I make enough cold calls, eventually somebody's going to say yes, take a meeting, and potentially get into my pipeline.
Hmm.
Well, and I love the example that you gave there as well, because a lot of people make a lot of assumptions when, for example, I'm selling into construction, I'm selling into HR, I'm selling to legal. A lot of people have these assumptions of, oh, you're in legal, then you must be like this. Or
Hmm.
you're in construction, you must be like this. And a lot of that is because they've built up these personas of who they target. And persona based selling is important, but it just doesn't take it far enough. And I'll give you an example. Everybody who's ever sold anything, into mid-market or enterprise, or sold something that's somewhat complex, large deal cycle, would not apply if it's transactional, but at some point had to deal with legal in their sales process of trying to get that contract to the finish line. Well, a lot of people assume that people in legal are going to be a particular way, and they would never, write a message in a very informal, casual, exciting way. But you know what? Surprise, surprise. People in legal have personality types where that would actually be appropriate. And to be very stuffy and corporate and formal, which is the way most people would be with somebody in legal, actually would not be the right approach. And so that's where deals can get stuck and don't move forward as fast, or become less of a priority, or don't happen at all.
And so you've explained really well the power that customizing to personality can have. But walk me through how artificial intelligence, and we got to keep this at a very high level because I know the details would take us all day. But at a high
Yeah.
level, how does artificial intelligence scrape someone's profile, so to speak, to determine what type of messaging they're going to best resonate with?
Yeah, yeah. And I'm just chuckling to myself because the way you ask that question is so interesting, because there's some personality types that just want that direct, straight to the point, high level explain. And
Yeah,
then there's some who are not me, and
yeah,
I don't think they're you either, that really want to know how the sausage is made, and they want as much detail
yeah,
as
yeah.
possible, right? And that's just a great example of two very different types of personality, and how you would sell to, different people based on that. So anyway, I'll answer the question. So um, high level, there's 180 plus data points, all public data that Humantic collects. Largely, a lot of that comes from LinkedIn, and that goes through natural language processing. So we look at, about section, comments, posts, things that go out. We pull from Google search, Twitter, LinkedIn. A lot come from LinkedIn. We even look at education level, promotion path. We even look at recommendations on your LinkedIn profile that have been given and what those say, ones that you've given to others, and how
Hmm.
those are written and words that are chosen. So all of that goes through natural language processing. And then it goes into our machine learning that's built off psycholinguistics in order to identify the disc and the ocean personality type of that person. And then all of the feedback that we give, from here's what they care about most, here's a glimpse of this person, here's what you should and shouldn't do to build a connection and in a meeting, all of that, all the way into negotiating, closing, and setting expectations. All of that is given based on the personality of that person.
And so it sounds like then if I have any knowledge of the industry already, then this tool is going to make me unstoppable as far as having that much more information when I show up to that first call or when I attempt to gain that first meeting. And I imagine that, just like I mentioned with Chat GPT folks, trying to spam me on, hey, we'd like to write some stuff for you. Well, I
Yeah.
could do that too on Chat GPT, thanks. If I use this tool that you're mentioning in a way that is trying to cut at least basic industry knowledge out, then it could be more dangerous than it's worth. Because if I show up with just a disc profile, but I still know nothing about these folks' business, their P&L, what they're doing, then again, at the very best, I'm extending my sales cycle because I'm going to have to force them to turn it over to me. Or at the worst, I'm going to kill the sale altogether if I show up and try to be personable, because that's what the data is showing me this person cares about. They're more relationship based, but I know nothing about their business. Do you think that's going to make it harder for me to sell, or is this really one and all package? I can take this and not know anything about an industry and still succeed.
Yeah. You still need to know the industries you serve. You still need to know the problems that they have and that you solve. You still need to do, teams have told us that using Humantic cuts down their research time by over 30%. And
Mm,
so it's more about the person, right? You still need to know like the company, the org chart, the people that you're selling to, the stakeholders, all of that stuff. You need to know what they do, who they serve, who their customers are, who their competitors are. Like, you still need to know all that stuff. We're a buyer intelligence platform, so we're going to tell you everything that you need to know about the person. Now, the person is the most important thing in the sales process, right? It's human to human, right? And so knowing what they value most, what you should or shouldn't do, or even knowing if you're selling to a group of people, right? Which can become more challenging. Hey, there's 5 people in the room, virtually or in person. They all have different
Mhm.
personalities. Then what do I do? We'll actually analyze that committee for you, give you the
Hmm.
collective personality and say, hey, based on these people and these personalities, here's the type of lens that this deal is going to be evaluated for. Here's who's best suited to be your champion for your deal. Here's who you need to be concerned about that is most likely to put your deal at risk that you obviously need to neutralize, and then everything in between.
And you mentioned things like who I need to be most concerned about, and we're going to build a sales system here that I want to encourage everybody to take advantage of what you're going to offer at the end of the show to get to the platform, because it's going to be able to do most of this on its own. But I also want to give salespeople something that they can immediately implement and use. So if I'm researching just a couple of things that
Yeah.
artificial intelligence can give to me through these platforms, but let's say I'm still trying to convince my sales leader to take advantage of it, right? So I've got to do this on my own at first,
Yeah.
knowing who I need to be most concerned about, something that platform can deliver. But that's something I could probably do if I had enough time to research. What are 2 other things that you see salespeople not taking the time to learn until they're in the middle of the sales process that this platform can deliver on its own?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing and the best place to start is knowing yourself. What is my
Mm,
personality? Because then once you know yourself and your own personality, then you're going to know what your natural tendencies are. You're going to know the way that you're going to sell by default,
mm,
right? And that's really one of the most important things, because if I get in the room with somebody who is just like me, then I'm good. I can just sell the
yeah.
way that I would normally sell, which is basically going to be the way that most sellers are going to sell, is how they would want to be sold to if they were on the other side of the table. And so
Mm,
knowing yourself is a really important place to start. And then just knowing some of the real basics of different personality types and knowing what you should avoid with each type, right? With a D type person, you need to get straight to the point and align with their goals. That's what they care about most. With an I type person, you need to build some rapport and pleasantries and small talk, right? Those are 2 very different examples, right? So just being able to know those different examples there are really beneficial to showing up differently, because a lot of people show up to a sales call thinking by default, I need to build rapport and small talk and pleasantries. And that actually irritates some people. They don't want to waste their time with that. And what happens when you use that approach is they check out. And then everything
yeah.
that you have to say that's actually really good and important after that, they're not really that engaged or listening to it.
So it sounds like then a great sales system to build would be the beginning of this process, which is knowing myself and my own selling style. Because, like you
Yes.
said, this is something that I've been selling for years and years now, and no one has ever encouraged me to ask, Sean, how do you buy? So that you know how you're showing up on sales calls, and you know then, did I run into somebody with my personality type? Great, I don't have to change it all. I don't have to alter, shift, pivot. But if it's somebody that is not like me, and I'll just give you an example of me, I'm definitely that high D type. Pleasantries I've learned to incorporate when it's necessary. But if you come to me with facts, figures, statistics, say this is how it's going to align with your goals, I'm like, great, where do I sign? Spend a half
Yeah.
hour trying to talk about my family life and my dog inside of a business conversation. That sale's not going to end well. So I'd love to build this system. Now, when we talk about systems builds, we use the same process that kept us alive on battlefields when we were in the military, which is trimming hope away from our strategy with each new system. So after every mission, we would either alter or build a system that would allow us to be even more successful the next time. So I want to make this applicable to salespeople around the world, no matter what they're selling, enterprise level sales, or they're in an SDR, or they're just an inside sales rep responsible for 100 dials a day. I want to make sure that they can take advantage of this. So we talk about systems builds. It starts with trimming. So we use this acronym TRIM because we're trimming hope
Yeah.
away from our sales strategy. The T in TRIM is the trigger. When should I trigger a system that encourages me to look at what type of salesperson am I? Am I direct? Am I intuitive? When does that need to happen, Colin? Is it right before I make a call to somebody to kind of check in with myself, or does it happen way before I'm even developing my ideal buyer profile? Where should I pull this system off the shelf to learn what type of salesperson am I, so that I know how to best adapt that to my prospects?
Yeah. This is something that you want to implement from the very beginning. And what I
Mm,
mean is exactly what you touched on, Sean, there is before you ever reach out, because segmenting by personality type can help you better target and select and prioritize, right?
Mm,
Maybe selling outside of your type is really challenging. So maybe you only target people like you. We've even seen, and now if you look at more of a macro level, right, we've even seen sales teams that start to lead score based on personality or have a vast pattern of types that they're most likely to win with. You can do a simple win loss
mm,
analysis and say, is there personality types we win with more often? And if the answer to that is yes, and it's 2 or 3 or 100, 400%, why would you prospect to anybody else? You're wasting your
yeah,
time, right?
yeah.
So if you implement this from the very beginning of helping you target and select and define your prospect list, then you can segment those, right? So, and this can happen on every channel. So if it's on the phone, you can segment your list and you can have a script that's specifically for those types of people. If it's over email, you enroll them into a sequence where all of the messaging is written in the communication style of those people. If this is over social, same thing. And it becomes much easier when you're focused and targeting a specific type of person, rather than kind of shifting and going all over the place, right?
And
So
it seems like part of this thing would be understanding where I'm at first. So I want to make sure this is part of the trigger because you're already jumping into the R and trim, which is making this
yeah,
repeatable. Like, what are the steps I need to follow? Which is brilliant. We're absolutely going to
yeah,
go there. How do I discover what type of salesperson I am? Is that asking my peers, asking my friends? How
yeah.
do I figure out? Am I direct? Yeah, because self reflection is sometimes the hardest thing for us in sales. How do I figure this
Yeah.
out?
Yeah, I mean, there's two ways really. There's like these disc assessments that you can take that
Mhm.
have a ton of questions and take some time, and that's one way. The simpler path is you can look at your Humantic profile, right? You can check out your
Mhm.
Humantic profile and see what it says about you.
Nice. Love it. Love it. All right. So we have two ways then. And now that I'm out of the trigger element, which I love, way before you're conducting outreach, you better figure out how you sell so that am I butting up against somebody that's a good match or a wrong match? The R and trim, making this thing repeatable. So you've mentioned already prioritizing by type. Now, if I figure out what type of salesperson I am, before I can prioritize, I have to categorize. So how do I know whether the prospects I'm reaching out to are my type or not? And obviously, Humantic can deliver this, but I want to give salespeople at least a taste of what they can do on their own. So if I don't have the platform, what am I looking for at a top line to figure out is this person my type or are they one of the other types?
Yeah, I mean, a couple examples is, kind of, and you even touched on some of this, right? Like a D type, they're not going to want small talk. You want to focus on solutions, so skip the noise, right? So you can pick up on certain things and how they are, and even their tone and
Mm,
dominance, right? So you can pick that up. I types, you don't want to be transactional with them. You want your meetings to have a healthy dose of small talk and pleasantries, and the winning mantra with those folks is actually feelings, not facts. So I type, and for a D type, that's something you mentioned earlier, Sean, is you actually have to turn that on, right? So knowing
yeah,
when that, and you can see if somebody gets on and they start talking about this, that, and the other that has nothing to do with business, like pretty good chance they're an I type, right?
yeah.
I type, we also see like cold calling to I types has a lot of success because they're chatty, they like to talk.
Mhm.
They're more likely to actually pick up their phone than other types of people. Then you have the S types, which are more steady, right? So they typically take a bit more time. They need a little bit more space. And that's something, where if you're too pushy or you try to challenge them too much, then that's going to backfire on you. Where with a D type, you can challenge them a bit and it actually will work really well and they actually respect you for it. C types, these are the types they want to know how the sausage is made, more detail, more formal. And you got to show them your expertise, not your salesmanship where, you could do with a D type. So picking up, understanding these small little things can help somebody greatly. And then knowing what to look for in people to identify what type they might think they are.
And we learned on the battlefield that battles were not won and lost in the field, they were won in planning and preparation. And so, a lot of what you're talking about that Humantic can do is get into social media, especially on LinkedIn, and figure out all of this stuff beforehand. But if I don't have the platform and I'm on LinkedIn, how do I learn whether the person I'm about to reach out to is more than likely a D, an I, an S, or a C? What am I looking for in their posts and their language that gives me some insight? So maybe it's not entirely certain, but better off than I would be just trying to get on the phone and guess.
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is it's really hard. It's really
Mm,
hard, and it does take sort of a lot of practice and expert level to be able to identify these type of things. But you can you can look for certain things, like a D type person. They're gonna say things like, "What do you want?" or "What's the price?" Right, and they're gonna be more like very direct.
mm,
An I type are going to want to know more about you and your clients, and stories and customer success stories and such. And those are a couple of examples, right? So you can pick up certain things of and a D type might want to know more about what, an I type more about who, and then more of a C type would want to know how, and S would be more like why, right? So like how they ask questions or what they are concerned about. So reading their LinkedIn profile yourself might be very challenging, but in a cold
mm.
call, or on a discovery call, you can start to pick up on some of these things. A D type is going to be very high volume, slow speed. An I type is going to be more high volume, fast speed. So even like tone of their voice, a lot of people who followed disc selling for a long time would identify, based on how they shake your hand, right? Is it more like jabbing and firm? Is it more like extroverted or closed? Are they a little bit more reserved? Things like that. So these are all things that you can pick up on to identify their personality type. But the reality is it's very challenging. It's not easy. And then if you're doing it virtually, it's even a bit harder.
So it sounds like the phone is the best way to do this, or a Zoom meeting, or better yet, I'm sure an in-person conversation. So if I'm segmenting, prioritizing has to come from then being able to look at a subsegment and figure out, is this a D, an I, or an S, or a C? So if
Yeah.
I've figured out who they are, I've got to label and tag them somehow, ideally in a CRM or through a
Yep.
platform like Humantic. And then I can prioritize so that next week when I reach out to the 15 people I chatted with this week, I know that these 3 are D's, these 5 are I's, these 6 are C's. So I love this basic system. It all starts again from knowing what type of salesperson am I first. Because
Yes.
possible to be able to mold yourself to be a chameleon enough to completely jump into another type. But knowing where you come from, at least then lets you know, where do I need to be a little bit more flexible where I wouldn't be otherwise. So we've got the T and the R. Now we're going to move into the I in trim, which for us is making things improvable. Because we learned as soon as we used something enough times and became muscle memory, probably was time to improve it, because the battlefield was always changing. Sales is always changing. Social media is changing, and especially artificial intelligence. I'm sure by the end of our conversation, improvements will have been made that will require both of us to have to go back to the drawing board. That's how fast that entire platform is moving. So how am I going to improve this, Collin? Maybe a month from now, a quarter from now? What am I going to look at to determine, am I doing the right things in the right way so that this system can be made better? How am I going to look at making this better?
Yeah, I mean, it starts with being able to track and measure it, right? So if you are, and assuming you're not using something like Humantic, right? Could you still pull this off? Yes. Would it be more challenging? Yes, but it is possible, right? So, kind of some of these things that we talked about, these things to look for in these people. If you start to track these things in the CRM and segment these lists, and then earlier we talked about people mostly build their prospecting around like persona, and then we talked about assumptions that get made in specific job titles or industries. Some of that is does hold true, right? Like I'll give you an example. If you're selling into sales leaders, you're likely going to have a lot of D type, high, medium D, might be SDDS. Like, so you're good. You can make a bit of an assumption there that, your approach can be mostly to sell to like D type people. There's going to be some people that are not, and that's not going to work. But if like 60, 70%, are, then that's still, a way that you could pull this off. So in order to improve this, you have to measure it. You have to
Mm,
measure, and to measure it well, you got to have a process in place. How am I going to approach D types differently than I would normally. And so even when we run proof of concepts, we always measure it against a control group, right? So let's say you have 100 contacts, take 50, reach out to them the
Yeah.
way that you normally would. Take the other 50, segment them based on personality, and have more of an approach based on what you know about those different types of people, and measure that against each other. You will likely see that when you are personalizing to the personality of the person and speaking and writing messages in their communication style, that you are going to have a big uptick in the results there, whether it's response rates or meetings booked or pipeline generated, whatever KPI you're measuring.
I love the idea of tracking then how am I approaching different types differently? Because just knowing this person's a high D, for instance, doesn't mean that I'm necessarily adapting my sales style. So if I'm not changing my messaging and I just know he's a high D and hoping again that I figure it out on the call what to do, not a recipe for success. But knowing they're a high whatever and adapting, then your questioning, your tone, the things that you're doing, absolutely going to make a difference. So if that's the way we're going to improve it, then we're moving into the M in trim, the final part of this process build, which is measuring. And you mentioned measuring, but I'm curious to know then if I'm looking back a quarter from now, next 3 months, back at what I started to do today, what am I going to measure to know that this system is producing better results? Am I looking at closed deals? Am I looking at pipeline velocity? Am I looking at engagement? What do you recommend I really measure and track that's an objective metric to see, is this thing really producing results for me?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few, right? I always like to say, what KPI is top priority to improve, right? Is that first time to engagement? Is that response rate on outbound? Is that pipeline generated? Is that moving more meetings from first meeting to second meeting? Is that shortening sales cycles? So there's all kinds of different things that you can measure. Pick one. Don't try to measure them all. Pick one,
Yeah.
whatever that is, and then start there. And you will start to see by customizing how you sell to people based on their personality can have a pretty significant impact at every stage of the sales cycle.
This is amazing. Now, of course, we're trying to get this done in a basic way without Humantic, but I want to give everybody the opportunity to get in on the offer that we talked about, which is how do I take advantage of this platform, test it out, take it on the road and figure out, is it really going to cut my research time down by a third and give me the data that I need to step into an engagement, knowing the different personality types, the concerns of each of these people, what they're likely going to be questioning me about, so that I can prepare those things ahead of time, almost like having a crystal ball in a sales meeting, I'd imagine. So talk to us a little bit about how we take advantage of that and how we connect with you offline on LinkedIn. I know you're active there, but how else can we get in touch with you, Collin?
Yeah, so best thing to do is just go to humantic.ai. And on the top right-hand side of the page there, you'll see a free trial, and you can install the Chrome extension. And it's a 7-day trial, and you can run up to 50 profiles. Like I said earlier, getting to know yourself is the best place to start, right? So check out your own profile, and then start to test it out, on some people you're trying to prospect into. Or a fun one is, hey, what deals do I have that are stuck right now?
Yeah.
And let's check out that buying committee. Let's check out those profiles of those people. So that's a really good place to start.
I think at the very least, taking advantage of a free offer to have AI scrape your social media profile to figure out what buying type am I to our entire conversation. Awesome place to start. Save you the time of doing it so that you know, how am I perceiving or how am I being perceived through social media? And that way, at least you know then how to show up saying, I am a high D. I need to make sure that I'm running into eyes. I'm really getting into the relationship build part. So that's an amazing, great place to start, Collin. Thank you so much for leveraging AI in a way that actually helps salespeople rather than, give me a 3-paragraph email that's going to tell me X, Y, and Z, because that's something that is not very original. But taking data and then putting the human element to it, humanizing the internet, great mission statement. I hope you guys continue to do that. And for all of us here at Bulletproof Selling, make sure that you are checking these live stream archived on YouTube on our Bulletproof Selling channel, subscribing there. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere that podcasts can be found, best thing you can do for us is leave a review so that other people know hope does not have to be part of a sales strategy. We can take the things that the military uses to keep people alive on the battlefield and help make us more successful in sales. So, Collin, thank you so much for joining us today, serving the sales community. Let's get out there and make selling bulletproof.